interested in that decision that Reddit made to open source.
Well, it was something that had been on our minds for a little while, and actually credit to Steve Newhouse. This happened post-acquisition. He actually brought it up during one of our quarterly meetings and said, "Weren't you guys going to open source the site?" And Steve and I looked at each other, and yeah, and he was like, "You should definitely do that." And got some documentation together, put it all out. The repercussions of that were, we ended up actually hiring some fabulous developers from that white hats, who discovered security exploits, let us know, and also used that open source to build interesting things. But it really demonstrated the value was in the community. And when Steve and I were sitting in that little apartment in Medford, just looking at each other, trying to never set your computers on opposite sides of each other, because then you're just staring at your co-founder all day when you're not playing Warcraft. And we realized that and this went into the very first FAQ that I wrote, all Redditors were created equal. All Redditors were equal. No Redditors were more equal than others. And this is partially because I love George Orwell, but also because we had a karma system that was to encourage people to contribute. But at no point did we want a power user to exist with hundreds of thousands of karma points to have more than one sort of point worth of a vote. A new user should be able to come to Reddit and get on the front page that same day, and then be on the Today Show the next day, which is literally what happens now. This is in stark contrast to our chief competitor, Digg. Which I think in many instances, although they were there first with a celebrity founder who launched it on a TV show months before we did, months before we were aware, thankfully, because by being ignorant of our competition, we built a site the way we thought it should be built, which was one where it was totally equitable and where we did as much as we could for our users. That's why there's so little advertising on Reddit. That's why we wanted, maybe to a fault, such information density on that front page. And over time, when we decided to let people create their own subreddits, we did that just because we didn't have a clue what to make. We made the first subreddit programming because a bunch of programmers said that programming links weren't showing up on the front page anymore. And at that point, we realized we have no idea what to do with this. We will build a tool to let anyone create a subreddit. If they want to create one called IEMA, 3 years later, Woody Harrelson is doing a catastrophic interview there. But a week earlier, Neil deGrasse Tyson is doing a fabulous interview there. That all happens because a bunch of people most of whom I've never met, are so invested in this tool and are as excited for the success of their subreddit as Steve and I were when we were sitting in that apartment watching the little traffic graph go up. And that does wonders. It's just, it doesn't take much. I mean, it's really showing a few graphs and making someone feel some ownership over something, but it's enough to get people to do brilliant, wonderful things.
Again, I'm hearing this notion of bringing information back into the system, but sharing it with users and empowering users with it.
I was just going to ask, with the open sourcing of Reddit,
yeah,
which I think you're right. I mean, it kind of highlighted the power of the community, and that it wasn't the software that was the issue; it was the community that was built around the software. But the question is, what's been done with the open? Like, has anyone actually done anything that's sort of long lasting with the open source?
Will probably not surprise you. I think to date most trafficked open source version of Reddit is entirely for pornography. Unfortunately, no, there hasn't been. No one has created. We always kind of wondered, and it's probably only a matter of time before a bunch of Redditors get really angry and go off and launch their own Reddit. But it hasn't happened yet. Now, part of that is also due to the fact that there hasn't been. Reddit now has 10 employees. We're catching up, Craigslist. And so there hasn't. All right. But there hasn't been anyone managing that project actively. The documentation is terrible. There's so much work to be done, to the point that these open source things usually just don't magically happen. There's a lot of top-down work. But it just stressed the fact that, even though our hotness algorithm, the commenting, the sorting of our comments, the thing that makes things like IEMA and Today I Learned and Ask Science possible, that magic sauce that makes Reddit comments not suck, unlike YouTube and all the rest that make you doubt humanity, is publicly available. You can Google for that algorithm right now and see how it works. I just wish more people would copy it so we could sue them. No, I wish more people could copy it.
Slashdot had open sourced years before.
And we looked at their source. Yeah, Karma. The Karma system. Admittedly, the Hindus or the Buddhists get credit for it, but that was, Steve and I were Slashdot
But
users.
this is part of this more general thing where if you have something with a model that isn't based on copyright fundamentally, that whether it's open source or not winds up having very little effect on how it's run.
Although the fact that it's open source creates a kind of safety valve for a community which knows For the same reason, if I'm contributing to an open source project, I know I can fork it if the project goes off the rails.
Only if the value's in the code. And I think what Bram is saying, for a lot of these things, once I've internalized the Karma system, I don't necessarily need access to anyone's underlying implementation. So this is back to Joey's the Internet's a Belief system.
Yeah.
There are some things where you need the underlying, you need the Linux kernel to do a bunch of things. But when you've understood what Slashdot was doing, Reddit's Karma system is a significant, I mean, Slashdot's was a Rube Goldberg machine. It was just layers and layers, both at the level of the actual Perl and at the level of how the overall system worked. It was better for you guys to fork, in order to
Start from scratch.
ideologically fork rather than to fork the code.